Hi everyone, this is a video to walk you through secondary leading tone chords. So we'll go through this worksheet together. As you can see at the top, our definition of secondary leading tone chords is a leading tone chord, so that means a diminished chord of some kind that tonicizes a note in a key other than, of course, the tonic. And so the best way to think about these is in relation to secondary dominant chords, right? 5, 7 of something, because they're both functioning with that dominant function, right? So they're leading us somewhere, they're tonicizing something. But in both of these cases, the secondary function is going to some note other than the tonic. And so let's go through a couple of these chord progressions here at the beginning so we can listen to these. Right, there is our diatonic chord progression, right? 2, 5, 1. And now you can see this F becomes F sharp. This is familiar to us from thinking about secondary dominance. So in this case, 5, 6 of 5 going to 5, right? We've created this leading tone by making a half step where there was a whole step. And so here is this chord progression, 5, 6 of 5 going to 5. All right, F sharp is the secondary leading tone in that chord, as well as this new chord. And this is our secondary leading tone chord. As you can see, it's a 7 diminished of 5. So I would say it, or leading tone diminished of 5. F sharp, still the leading tone. F sharp now becomes, of course, in a leading tone chord, it becomes the root of the chord. So we're building a diminished triad based on F sharp. So listen to this chord now. All right, and here they are back to back, these two chromatic chord progressions. The leading tone. Right, so you can hear they have a similar function, they have a similar impetus to resolve to, in this case, the 5. Let's hear a couple other versions of this. So I'm just going to play this second system straight through so you can hear it. All I've done here is added sevenths here. And so we have a 2, 7. And then here we have, instead of a 5, 6 as above, we have, as you can see, a 5, 7 of 5 going to resolving to 5. And I'm still marking where this leading tone is resolving, right? Now I also have the 7th in each of these resolving down by step, right? As we know, 7ths always and forever are going to resolve down by step. And then finally over here, I have a 7 fully diminished 7 of 5. We'll talk about the different types of diminished chords in just a second, but this is a fully diminished 7th. It's the one you're going to see most often with a secondary function. Again, F sharp, that secondary leading tone that we've created by raising the diatonic F to the chromatic F sharp in the key of C, that leading tone is going to resolve up. So here are these 3 versions of this chord progression, just straight through. And the leading tone. Awesome. And so I'd like to just point out really quickly in the leading tone chord here, the secondary leading tone chord, this last one, the 7th up here is the E, right? Now, what type of 7th is that? We have to be really careful that we're measuring the 7th as either a minor 7th, in which case this would be a half diminished 7th chord, or a fully diminished 7th chord, which requires a fully diminished, or a diminished 7th, of course, right? So which one is this? Right now, it is a half diminished 7th, so that's possible. But if I it's a possible chord. But if I want to make sure that it matches this analysis, I better lower that seventh again, E flat. Now look, F sharp to E flat, fully diminished seventh. Notice when I just play them in isolation, that interval, F sharp to E flat, that fully diminished seventh sounds an awful lot like a major sixth, right? But F to E, always some sort of seventh. So listen to it again, this time with the fully diminished seventh. Cool. And I wanted to point that out to you because, as you can see, there are now two accidentals involved in writing this chord, this fully diminished seventh of 5. And that's going to be true in a major key. You'll see that sometimes there are 2 accidentals required, sometimes even 3. So just always be really careful about checking your intervals, right? And making sure that the anatomy of the chord, right? The 3rd, the 5th, the 7th above the root is always exactly what it should be. And we'll practice making some of these chords in just a second. But until then, let's take a look at this chord progression. So we're going to compare what is essentially the same chord progression with 4 different variations. So let's listen to the first one. Okay, this is G major. I've analyzed it as G major. Notice there's nothing in the key signature, but the only type of F that we get is F sharp. So that makes a lot of sense to analyze it in G major, right? And in this brief little context, you can think of this as an excerpt maybe from a larger piece. It would make a lot of sense. And everything makes sense. 2, 1, 4, 6, 5, 7, 1. So perfectly normal diatonic chord progression we get. The 2 to 1 starting off is a little bit unusual, but it's fine, especially because then it sort of proceeds along really normal chord progression guidelines, right? The tonic goes to 4, 1 loves to go to 4, right down a perfect fifth, and then 4 is our predominant to dominant tonic, right? And nice strong cadence in G. Now look at the lead sheet symbols, A minor, G, C, D7, G. Okay, now look at the next chord progression, 1B, and compare those lead sheet symbols. They should be identical. And yeah, so here we go. How am I able to analyze this in C? Well, let's listen again, thinking about these Roman numerals in C major. Okay, we have now 6, 5, 1, 6, 5, 7 of 5 to 5 in C major. So say, like in the previous chord progression, this is now an excerpt from a larger piece, but everything around this is in C major. Maybe there's even a cadence in C immediately after this, something along these lines. Well, then it would be hard to argue with the fact that this is definitely in C major. And what's happened is we've just got this little secondary dominant chord, this one note, just this one F sharp that pushes us to G, just for these 2 chords, right? And so listen to it again now with that C at the end to really sort of confirm the idea that we are in C. When you hear that C at the end, it feels like tonic, right? It feels like home, even though the G kind of felt like tonic at first, but then no, oh no, the C really is tonic, right? So that's just there to help us hear that. But this is an important idea in thinking about context. So when we're analyzing music, it's all about the context that we're in, the larger context. And that's going to be true going forward as well. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys. And the strategy here, the way to approach analyzing music when you're you might not even be sure what the best key to analyze is to go lead sheet symbols first, right? And that's why I've included those here. And so you can pick a key based on these lead sheet symbols, right? So let's take a look at another example. This is almost the same chord progression, but instead of using the 5 here, so if you look at 1A, I have the 5, 7. In G, I'm now using a diminished chord. And so it's the same procedure. I have the same chord progression in G major and then again in C major. So the Roman numerals will change, but you'll notice that here the lead sheet symbols are identical between these two chord progressions, 1C and 1D. So take a listen to both of these. They should sound exactly the same, but here think about ending in G, and then think about ending in C for the next one. And notice also with this example that we actually have a 7 half diminished 7. So this is our half diminished leading tone chord. And that is, of course, the diatonic leading tone chord in a major key. So in order to keep these the same, we now have a 7 half diminished 7 of 5 in C. Right? And so that's totally fine. We heard both versions up here, right? Resolving to the 5. So either quality is totally acceptable when you're resolving to a major chord. So let's actually look at the different types of diminished chords. This is basically a review, right? So this is all the types of leading tone diminished chords in all their inversions, right? Really quickly, the triad, of course, we usually see in first inversion. So expect to see that in first inversion, including when it is a secondary function chord, right? Though sometimes it's a little bit more common when you're dealing with secondary function leading tone chords to get a root position or some other inversion. But typically you have that first inversion triad. Now here's the half diminished 7th. Remember, this is a diminished triad with a minor 7th. This chord is not used all that often as a secondary function. You definitely see it, but what's important to note is that it may only tonicize major triads, right? So you can have a 7 half diminished 7 of 5 or a 4 in major, but never any minor triads. So keep that in mind. And the reason for that is because this chord, this leading tone chord, as you can see here, analyzed in C major, is diatonic to a major key. So it sounds really funky when it resolves to a minor triad. It doesn't sound right. A fully diminished 7th chord, however, although it's diatonic to a minor key, as you can see here, I've analyzed these in A minor. Here they are, different inversions. This is the most common for secondary function. So although it's diatonic to a minor key, it really can tonicize any major or minor triad in either key. So major or minor modes, it doesn't matter. This is going to be used all the time, super versatile, it's super useful. It can do lots of different things. So with that in mind, let's look now at just a couple practice examples for first 2 examples of analyzing chords like this, just isolated as you see here, and then writing some chords just from a Roman numeral analysis. So I have a little procedure here. When you're analyzing chords, we'll go top to bottom, and when you're writing chords from a Roman numeral analysis, then you can go bottom to top. You can just reverse it and it should work. So let's try a couple of these. You can listen to these. Right? Okay, definitely diminished. And notice we're in bass clef here, B flat major. It's important that we have the key given to us because, of course, accidentals are the name of the game here, which accidentals to use when, so that make sure the key signature matches. Now, okay, analyze with a lead sheet symbol. So that's our first goal here. So obviously this is in root position. We're starting off nice and simple root position chords. So E, G, B flat. Okay, good. So it's definitely diminished. That's great. And so it's going to be E diminished. Now my question really to you is, what type of seventh do we have here? E natural to D natural. What do we have there? That is a minor seventh. And so we can find that half diminished symbol. There we go, E half diminished seventh. Remember the other leading tone chord symbol that we sometimes get for half diminished is this guy right here, the E minor 7 flat 5. Either of these are acceptable, whichever you prefer for lead sheet symbols. Now, okay, step 2, if it's a diminished chord, check. The root might be a secondary leading tone. Okay, so how do we figure out if it is? Find the note a half step above the root. All right, E is our root. Half step above that is F natural. Cool. And if that note, F natural in this case, is the root of a major or minor chord in the given key, B flat, the chord is a 7 diminished of that chord. Okay, so F in the pitch F in the key of B flat major is indeed 5. So that is a possible secondary leading tone chord, right? Because it has to tonicize a major or minor triad. 5 is a major triad in B flat major. And that would go underneath the slash here, right? And then it's a half diminished 7 chord. So 7, half diminished 7 of 5. There is your final answer for your Roman numeral analysis. Let's try a minor key example. The root here looks like F sharp. Don't forget about your key signatures. Again, that's really important. There's going to be lots of accidentals, but the key signatures are obviously still really important here. So F sharp, A, C, that is a nice diminished chord. So we know that at least we have F sharp diminished, and then F sharp to E flat, diminished 7th. That means we have a fully diminished 7th. Right? F sharp diminished 7th. Great, and it's in root position, so we don't need to worry about that. Step 2, since it is a diminished chord, we can now look a half step above F sharp. It's the root. Half step above that, that's going to be G. Okay, cool. So G, does what is G? What Roman numeral is G in B minor? It's going to be Roman numeral 6. It's a major or minor triad in the key, right? G. And so yes, it can be tonicized. The G can be tonicized, and so that 6 would go under the slash here, and we get 7, fully diminished 7 of 6, right? F sharp diminished 7 in the key of B minor. There it is. All right. Notice a special thing about this chord here in this key is that the F sharp is a diatonic note in B minor, right? That's scale degree 5. But we have these 2 accidentals up here, the C natural to make it a diminished triad, and the E flat to make it a fully diminished 7th chord, right? That diminished 7th, which changes the quality of this chord. This is obviously not a 5 chord, right? F sharp major is a 5 chord in B minor, right? Or F sharp 7 is a 5/7 chord. But no, this is a fully diminished 7 chord. It's not functioning in that way, right? It's not functioning like a 5 or a 5/7. It's clearly has some different function because of these changed notes, because of this chromaticism, the C and the E flat. And so that's what triggers us to look for some other explanation, right? And so that's what we're doing. So that's the strategy here when you're looking at real music and you see these accidentals. You're like, okay, well, the strategy is to basically figure out, okay, what are these accidentals doing? And I think the first step, whenever possible, is to try to figure out a lead sheet symbol that'll really give you a lot of hints, right? Because once you figure out this lead sheet symbol it's a fully diminished seventh chord, the light bulb should go off. Very likely what's happening is this chord is going to be a secondary leading tone chord, right? Pulling you to some other chord tonicizing some other scale degree, in this case 6, in B minor. So that's just a general tip, general guideline here. And we'll get some practice looking at real music as well. So now going the other way, if I give you a lead sheet symbol, or sorry, not a lead sheet symbol, but a Roman numeral, and then ask you to write a chord. So what do we do? Okay, so we can kind of skip 3. I said we're going to go backwards. We can kind of skip 3 because actually we already know that it is in fact a lead sheet, sorry, a leading tone chord, right? Secondary leading tone chord. We don't need to check for that. So we go to sub 2. Find a note a half step above the root. So we got to go backwards. So now we got to find 2, right? So identify scale degree 2, Roman numeral 2 in E major. That is what? That's, here it is. I'm going to reveal that. We're still in treble clef, so F sharp, right? Okay, great. F sharp, of course, is a minor. 2 is, of course, a minor triad, F sharp minor, in E. And what would the leading tone be? We now have to go backwards from step 2 here. We have to go a minor second below this note that we're tonicizing, F sharp, and find the root of this chord, which is going to be E sharp. Okay? A minor second below F sharp is E sharp. So I'm going to reveal this chord to us, and we can see how this works. F sharp, the leading tone is E sharp, G, G sharp, B natural. That's a diminished chord, right? Awesome. And you can see here it is in root position. So this is where you would start. You would get right, E sharp as the root. You stack your thirds, double check each interval. Check a minor third, check the diminished fifth. And then, because it has to be first inversion, you can just pop that note up the octave, and then you get this this chord with the third in the bass. Excellent. Now, lead sheet symbol wise, I think it's worth doing. This is, of course, an E sharp diminished triad. So just E sharp diminished. You're going to E sharp dim, and then we'll do the inversion as well. G sharp in the bass. You can see that convert there. This is what your lead sheet symbol should look like. I would use the diminished symbol, right, like the degrees sign. Great. E sharp diminished over G sharp. Now, we're reintroducing here this idea of the slash notation in the lead sheet symbol. I want to be really, really clear about this. There's slashes in both of these symbols, and each slash means something completely different. Okay, so I want to be super clear on that. We avoided using this slash notation in lead sheets in the last unit, talking about secondary dominance, just to avoid the confusion, but these haven't gone away, and I want to reintroduce them now that we're a little more comfortable with this notation. So remember, Roman numerals first. When we're talking about secondary function chords, the note under the slash we read as of, right? So 7 diminished 6 of 2, the note under the slash is the note that's going to be tonicized, or the chord that's going to be tonicized. So you can see that here, F sharp, right? Scale degree 2. All right, that's the Roman numeral slash. The lead sheet symbol slash, which you should be already familiar with, we've been using it for a while, is there to indicate inversion, because we don't use figured bass like 6 or 6/5 or all of these up here. We don't use these figured bass symbols with lead sheets. We use the slash system instead. So we just give you the bass note, right? And it's super useful for lead sheet symbols. That's why it sticks around. just don't get those confused. Okay, and one more example here. We are in G minor. B flat is 3 in G minor. Good. Okay, and now we find the leading tone of 3, right? 7 diminished 7 of 3. So what's the leading tone of 3? Right? A minor second below B flat. Okay, and so stack these thirds. And now make sure that this is a fully diminished 7th chord. So how do we do that? A up to C, minor third, good. A D flat, diminished 5th, perfect. That is our diminished triad. Now fully diminished 7th, so we need a diminished 7th. Not a minor 7th, but a diminished 7th. A natural to G natural. That doesn't sound right. Right, that's a minor 7th. We need diminished, so take that G, lower it by a half step. There we go. There is our fully diminished 7th. That is our 7 diminished 7 of 3. This is another example where the leading tone, A natural in this case, right? This leading tone is not a chromatic pitch, it's diatonic. The way that we get this chromatic chord is only through this fully diminished 7th, right? There's one accidental here and it's on the 7th. So that's really significant. This really important diminished 7th there will bring us into this function, right? From what would be a 2 chord, which is already diminished, right? But it's half diminished, not fully diminished. So that's an important thing. We can just finish this up with our lead sheet symbol, A diminished 7, right? Fully diminished 7, so just the circle. Awesome. Okay, and the last thing that we will do is just look at a couple of these chord progressions. I just want to make sure that you can hear these, so I'll play them now. So D major, let's get our key signature right. There we go. Now, looking at the accidentals that we need for this. So I want to point out that this is a B minor chord here, so that means we're tonicizing B minor. So first of all, find your leading tone, A sharp, right? That's going to be the root of the secondary leading tone chord. So obviously we're going to need an A sharp. Now if you build this chord, this 7 diminished 7 of 6, if you build that like we did up in one of these examples, you find that the next note, the third above A sharp, has to be C sharp. That's a minor third. So A sharp to C sharp, to E natural, to G. Again, that gives you your fully diminished 7. So that's where those accidentals come from. In terms of voice leading, we have our secondary leading tone, A sharp, resolving up to the note that is being tonicized. We also have the 7th. Really importantly, here's that G, A sharp to G, fully diminished 7th, falling down to F sharp. So in this case, the 5th of this chord. Right? So here that is one more time. Awesome. And now we have the same key signature, but this time we're looking at a minor example. So this is B minor. And we have a couple of options here. And let's listen to this first one. Okay, so this is the fully diminished 7th. It goes to going to 3. So again, we're tonicizing D major here. Happens to be the relative major, right? Just like B minor was the relative minor of D. So these are really common scale degrees to tonicize for that reason. They share a key signature. This is D being tonicized, so the leading tone is C sharp. And again, here, this fully diminished 7th chord F sharp, E, oh, sorry, C sharp to E to G. There's our diminished triad, and then B flat, diminished seventh, right? So just those two chords, right? Fully diminished seventh, resolving vector 3. Now, this is a great example, something to keep in mind. Also really cool that we get two different diminished chords, right, in a row here. Right, right, so that's sort of cool, the 2 and then the 7 of 3. Notice something really, really interesting here. We get the C sharp diminished triad, and then the C sharp diminished seventh. So they're both C sharp diminished chords. Okay, weird, right? Because this is going to be important when we look at this example. So the C sharp diminished, just the triad, that's just 2 in B minor, right? The 2 chord is diminished in a minor key. So it's, again, just like this example in G minor up here, it's the diminished triad. Actually, some of these accidentals aren't necessary there, right? Those are courtesy accidentals. So you can see this one accidental that's not in the key signature, B flat, it's that seventh. So it's taking this diminished triad and turning it into a fully diminished seventh chord. Now, this is going to be interesting. What if we try to do the same thing, but use a half diminished seventh chord? Okay, this would be the chord, C sharp half diminished seventh. Now, I'm actually going to erase this. And you'll see here, this is our B flat. We just want to make that into a minor seventh instead of a fully diminished seventh. And now we have this C sharp half diminished 7 going to D major. Okay, what chord is this? That's what I want to ask you. And I'll get rid of these courtesy accidentals, right? These, the E and the B natural, those are in the key signature. So what is this chord? Is it a chromatic chord at all? Actually, the C sharp also. I mean, look, no accidentals, right? Those are all courtesy accidentals. Okay, so what is this chord? It's not a secondary leading tone chord at all, actually. It's actually just this chord. 2 half diminished 7. Yeah, that's it. 2 half diminished 7. And so you have to be sort of careful. Again, this is just there to point out to us that you need to have some chromaticism. You need to have pitches in your chords that are not in the given key in order to have a secondary function, right? Diatonic chords have what we could call a primary function, right? A 2 chord in this case. If there's no accidentals, pushing it towards some other key, pushing it into some other function, then it's just going to be a 2 half diminished 7 chord, and that's great. And we can still have this chord progression, and it's still going to sound really good. But we're not really tonicizing 3 in the same way that this chord is, because this chord, we have a chromatic inflection that's going to pull us in a way to D that we don't get with the diatonic collection. Okay, and so that's just an important point about the 2 half diminished 7 chord, just to watch out for that. We'll talk more later about different ways that 2 chords can actually function in secondary keys as well. Sometimes those crop up, and the diminished chord especially will be a tricky chord to make sure to identify when that happens. But in the meantime, I hope that this helps. The best thing for you guys to do is to do a lot of practice, especially these sorts of exercises. And so let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.